Today I want to walk you through a simple drill that you can do to learn how to not get hit after you throw your left hand as a southpaw fighter. So a simple combination we're going to work on today is the 1-2 or the jab cross. And that means you're going to lead with a stiff jab and then come back with a really powerful left hand. And so most people, when they set up in their boxing stance and they're going to throw their 1-2, what they're going to do is they're going to step with their right hand, they're going to shoot their left hand as their right hand comes back, and then they're going to pull that left hand back and they're back to where they were. Alright, so in most cases that's a very good thing to do, especially for beginners. You just want to go 1, 2, come back. Alright, so you go 1, 2, come back. Hands are back, and most likely you can block a punch if a counter comes back. But as you move down the road and you begin to get more experience with boxing, you begin to start sparring, you need to figure out ways of getting out of the way after you throw a punch. And today, as I said, I'm going to walk you through a simple thing you can do after you throw your 1-2 or after you throw your left hand that'll help you get out the way. So, as you throw your right hand, you're going to lead with the right hand, you're going to shoot that left hand. And so, as you turn over your left hand and your right hand is still locked right here, you want to take that left hand and you want to take it and you want to slowly start bringing it back and pivot out the way. I don't pivot 90 degrees, I pivot about 45 degrees. And so the reason you want to slightly pivot out the way is, think of it this way. If I throw 1, 2, alright, I'm completely squared with my opponent. He most likely, as an orthodox fighter, he sees my left hand coming out. He's either going to come through with a left hook, but most likely he's going to try and counter with a right hand over the top or a right hand to my body, because my body is completely exposed. So as a southpaw fighter, what you want to do is you want to take this hand, and as soon as you start bringing it back, you pivot out the way. And the advantage of this is now your hips are no longer squared up with your opponent's hips. If he tries to throw that right hand, you are no longer in his center line. He can't throw that right hand. However, you are at an advantageous position where you can throw a jab, multiple jabs, or another left hand and land it. So that's a drill and a combination that my dad taught me at a very young age. And so what he would constantly drill me to do on the pads or on the heavy bag or even during sparring sessions was 1-2, pivot, 1-2, pivot, left hand, pivot. He would scream that shit all the time. And people that used to watch me spar or people that would watch us train would look at my dad like he was a little off his rocker, because he'd be like, 1-2, pivot, 1-2, pivot, 1-2, pivot. He drilled that combination into my head, and I would practice that all the time. And at first, I really hated that combination because that's all we worked on for like weeks or months at a time. Then we would stop, we'd move on to something else, and then a few weeks later, my dad would say, hey, this is what we're going to do. 1-2, pivot, 1-2, pivot. And so, as a southpaw fighter, that's the advantage that you have of when you fight an orthodox fighter, is that you have the ability to pivot outside and still have your lead hand in front, where you can jab off the side or you can throw a 1-2. So in real life situation, you're moving around, you're going to go 1, 2, pivot, jab, jab, jab. And so as a southpaw fighter, that's advantageous for you because you're moving to the outside of your conventional fighter or your opponent or your sparring partner or your coach. And as you move to the outside, think of your hips. Your hips, if they're straight in line with your opponent, you have as much chance of hitting him or her as they have is hitting you. So think about that really good. If my hips are in line, meaning in the same position as my opponent, he has as much chance of hitting me as I have of hitting him. Does that make sense? Think of it really good. Because if your hips are aligned, so our hips are aligned with our orthodox fighter, he can hit me with the right hand, I can hit him with the right hand. He can hit me with the left hand, I can hit him with the left hand. Why? Because our hips are in line. But as soon as I shoot my left hand, and I'm expecting a counter to come back from my orthodox fighter or whoever I'm sparring with right now, as soon as I expect that right hand counter to come by or come back, I'm going to pull my left hand, I'm going to pivot. Now think, my hips are no longer in line with my opponent. So I have an advantageous position over my orthodox fighter or sparring partner or whoever I'm in the ring with. And why is that? Because now I can shoot with the left hand. I can shoot with the jab. I can do a lot of things. Your opponent, whose hips are still facing this way, has no opportunity to hit me now because he's squared up facing someone that's no longer there. That's the benefit of learning how to pivot out the way after you throw your left hand. Now, this isn't something that you're going to implement every single time you throw your left hand, because someone will catch on, they're going to know you're going to throw your left hand, and then they're going to step to the outside when they see you throwing that left hand. But this is a drill that is critical and super important for southpaw fighters to learn, and it's because it helps you get the advantageous position over your orthodox fighter. And let's try it out a couple times of, we want to do like a full pivot, maybe it's 45 degrees, maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less. And so that's the beauty of working on this defensive move for a southpaw fighter is, I can be over here, my opponent, which I'm imagining right now in my head, is right here. I'm going to shoot my jab, shoot my left hand, and I'm going to take a baby pivot, square up, shoot another left hand, boom. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm just pivoting slightly out the way. And the quicker and the more times that you do this, the more accustomed you'll become to having this become subconsciously ingrained in your brain, like I did. So for me, it's like second nature to throw 1-2 and pivot out the way, because I did it for so many years, and I was drilled on it day in and day out by my father, who was my boxing coach. So as you're in the ring, or maybe in your house, these are a few things you can practice right now that help you learn how to pivot out the way when you're a southpaw fighter. So we're just going to start 1-2, pivot. Small pivot, maybe that's 15-20 degrees. We're going to try again. 1-2, pivot. A little bit more of an exaggerated pivot. And the idea is, as soon as this left hand goes out and you get full extension on it and you land your punch, you want to bring it back and move at the same time. And you'll see that my back foot, it never really leaves the ground. It kind of slides across the ground. So I never lose contact with the ground, and I never put myself fully off balance. And that's one of the benefits of pivoting out the way, is that you still have balance while you're making a quick movement. My foot is still in contact. So that's one of the keys that you need to think of and constantly put in your head, is when you're pivoting out the way and you're moving out the way after you throw your left hand, is you want to have that back foot keep in contact with the ground. It doesn't have to be nailed to the ground where it's super heavy, because your weight shifts to to your front leg, and you want to bring some balance back to your back leg, but you don't want to put too much weight on it as you're coming back. So you just want to glide that foot, set yourself, throw another left hand. So another option as you move to the outside, as I said before, was to jab. So we're here, 1, 2, nothing happens. 1, 2, jab, jab, jab. So it puts you at an advantageous position. You can throw the 1, 2, pivot out the way, don't hit anybody. Don't hit anything, don't do anything. Then the next time you pivot out the way, 1, 2, jab, jab, jab. A numerous amounts of jabs, moving outside, keeping your opponent off balance, and you're at an advantageous position. So let's review what we did today when it comes to a simple defensive trick that you can do as a southpaw fighter. So number one, you want to get in your boxing stance and you want to think of how can I hit and not get hit. And the simple way of doing that is you throw your 1, 2, and as soon as this arm goes out and you start pulling it back, your body starts to pivot and move out the way. I'm back to my boxing stance. You'll see my foot is slightly turned outwards. Boom, boom, boom. I just throw my jab, keep my opponent off balance. The second option, as you pivot out the way, is I want to take my 1, 2, I pivot out the way, my opponent's head is here, hips are squared that way, I shoot the left hand, and I can just pivot again. And I'm completely at an advantageous position for my opponent. He goes that way, I'm this way. The third option, which isn't the last option, but is a third option that you can do, is you shoot your 1, 2, and you just move out the way, and you don't throw any punches. And that's the beauty of this combination and this defensive drill, is that you can experiment with different things after you pivot out the way. But you need to focus on, while you're pivoting out the way, that you're not completely on your front foot and your back foot doesn't lose contact with the ground. You want to still stay balanced when you're pivoting out the way, because if I throw my left hand and I pivot and I'm off balance, I'm going to be off balance and I'll be at a vulnerable position of getting hit if my opponent catches on. So you want to keep balance, you want to keep your back foot in contact with the ground while you're pivoting out the way. The other thing is you need to experiment with how much you want to pivot. So think of it this way. If I'm here, I just want to pivot a little bit, I'm going to pivot this much. I want to pivot a lot, I'm going to pivot somewhere between 45 to 60 degrees. And sometimes what you can do is you completely pivot out the way, you'll be at 90 or so degrees. So think of, I'm at this position right now, I shoot my left hand, 90 degrees. I don't really have an advantageous position of throwing the left hand because I'm so not squared up, but I do have an advantageous position of throwing my jab. So as you work on this drill, think of pivoting in the aspect of moving out the way. As soon as you throw that left hand and it starts coming back, your body should move at the same time out the way. And experiment with, like what I said, different degrees and different angles of coming out with that left hand. What are your thoughts? Is this something that you can use in your training session or no? Let me know in the comments down below.